Ah, this book was so good, and I'm so sorry that I read this later in my teaching career. I wish I would have read it my first and second year, and that's because a lot of what's in here I have experienced or I am experiencing as an educator today. So, multiplication is for white people, raising expectations for other people's children by Lisa Delpit. And I could do a whole 2 hour presentation on this book. However, right now, we're just going to take some major and key points that I thought were important and go over them. So let's get started. So this is my advisory from my old school. These are my girls. I've been mentoring them since they were ninth graders. They're 12th graders this year, and I'm so proud of them. Each one of them is graduating. Although not all are shown in this picture, I'm always proud to just say, like, I was a part of their lives from ninth to 11th grade. Even though I wasn't with them their senior year, they have kept in contact. We have always kept in contact, and I'm so proud of them. And just in case you don't know where I am, because most people, think I'm a student, I am right here. So even though graduation and prom was canceled, I am still very proud of them. So back to the novel. So Lisa Delpit is a American author, educator, teacher, professor, activist, and basically what she does is she tries to inform mostly non-POC teachers about our Black children. So within this novel, like right in the introduction, right before we get into the good stuff, she has 10 factors that she believes encapsulates what we need to do as teachers, not just non-POC teachers, but teachers in general, to help our African American students. And I just wanted to read those to you so that we can start with the big picture. So number 1, recognize the importance of a teacher and good teaching, especially for the school-dependent children of low-income communities. 2, recognize the brilliance of poor urban children and teach them more content, not less. 3, whatever methodology or instructional program is used, demand critical thinking while at the same time ensuring that all children get access to basic skills, the conventions and strategies that are essential to success in American society. Provide children with the emotional ego strength to challenge racist societal views of their own competence and worthiness and that of their families and communities, which I think is very important. Number 5, recognize and build on children's strengths. Number 6, use familiar metaphors and experiences from the children's world to connect what students already know to school-taught knowledge. 7, create a sense of family and caring in the classroom, which I will say is the biggest thing that made me and my advisory get really close, is that we were considered a family. We weren't just advisees. Number 8, monitor and assess students' needs and then address them with a wealth of diverse strategies. 9, honor and respect the children's home cultures, which me being from California and moving to Georgia was, a different culture. I had to learn that myself. And 10, foster a sense of children's connection to community, to something greater than themselves. So I wanted to start with that big picture so you know what type of book we are dealing with. In my first year of teaching, I was praised if I had a quiet class when administration walked in. So the first thing I learned to do is how to quiet my class. That involved giving them worksheets, that involved giving them busy work, and that involved giving them tasks that required them to just sit there and be quiet. Sometimes I wouldn't even fight if a student said they weren't doing their work. In fact, I would just allow it to happen. What I didn't know was that I was contributing to a system that allows our students not to exceed because they're allowed to disengage with work and they're just giving busy work that isn't even up to the level that they should be. So instead of maybe challenging them like I should my first year, my whole goal to get high stars was to make sure that they were quiet. So have a seat. Don't bother me. I wouldn't necessarily be behind my desk, but I wouldn't necessarily be engaged with my students either. I didn't form connections. I didn't even really want my students to talk to me or know me. I just wanted to make sure they were quiet enough that I was able to just coast on by. And just a little backstory, I started my teaching career with Teach for America. I was in the Delta Corps 2014, and I got assigned to Jackson, Mississippi at Provine High School. So my second year of teaching, I decided to jump out of my comfort zone because I noticed that a lot of my students were falling behind and they were not interested in school. They were not interested in my class. So instead, I became something that Lisa Delpit says in her novel is a warm demander. So my students knew that when you came into my class, you were going to work. But it wasn't because Miss Lee just want to sit behind her desk. Miss Lee just want us to be busy. No, you're going to do your work because I want you to get something out of this class. I love you and I want you to succeed. So it wasn't like in my second year I became the greatest teacher. No, even in my 6th year of teaching, there is still a lot I have to learn. But the biggest thing I have learned is that I don't want to allow my students to fall into the stereotype threat that Lisa Delpit talked in here extensively throughout the whole novel, where we have our African American students and our African American boy students in particular who feel they are not good enough to succeed in school. They disengage in school. This is not something that they see as their territory. It's not their comfort zone. So what happens is they fall into what they think they are supposed to be, which is not a scholar, basically. This is not their realm of expertise. So instead of kind of fostering a environment where students could be themselves, where students felt like they had a grasp on the knowledge, I didn't really find my groove in creating that until probably my 4th or 5th year into actually teaching. So a big thing in education is short lectures and more student problem solving or something of that nature. Now, in Lisa Delpit's novel, she talks about a scenario where an African American teacher was lecturing about the Civil War, giving the major points, and basically asking his students how they are, what do you think? And after the lesson, he was given an evaluation, and he was scored pretty low. And the main thing they said was he lectured too much. His reasoning was, I have to know my students in order to teach them. So I get to know my students. I get to know what's going to motivate them. So in this example here, we have 2 of my students who are a little bit on the tug and pull side. I do have to do a little work in order to get them to do work. However, because I know them and because I know they're big sports fans and I know they're very, very competitive, especially with each other, I was able to make this lab a little bit more interesting to them. So they are owls and they are trying to pick up the mice, which you might see are these little beans down here. And the more mice you get, of course, the better owl you are. And I framed it in that way. Even though this was about limiting factors and density dependence, I framed it for them that way so that they were engaged in the lesson. And throughout the entire class, you would hear those 2 the most arguing. Because as you can see, Mr. Dwayne right there sitting on the desk basically gloating that he got 4 mice where you have this dude right here, like, no, you didn't. You only got 3. So they are engaged in this lesson. And at the end of it, when it was time to analyze data, they both came to me very excited with what they had found and what they had did. And if I did not know them, if I had allowed them to disengage in the beginning like they were trying to, I would have never had them complete the lab and complete it fairly well within the time frame that was given. So because I knew my students, I knew how to motivate them. And that's probably one of the biggest things as a teacher you could ever do. So Lisa Delpit talked about something called the pedagogy of poverty, where if you can't control a class, you're just going to give them a worksheet. I said in the beginning, my first year, that was definitely me. Worksheet, because I know I cannot quiet y'all down. However, I just made the decision to create groups and to also use the social nature of my students in order to enhance the work that we are doing. So sometimes when you come into my classroom, you will find these groups of students and they're not working on a worksheet. They might be discussing an article. They might be discussing a song. They might be discussing the lecture that we just had. Is the conversation 100% the material? No. However, my students are getting the chance to interact with their peers, which is definitely important within our community. We are social beings. We go to church. We call and respond. We tell stories that are passed down through generations and generations. That is our nature. We know how to play the dozens. While a lot of others might see that as disrespectful or not correct classroom culture, I try to use that to my advantage in order to get students engaged in this lesson. So this is one of my students, very silly, into anime, into gaming, very sweet child. He does have an IEP, and it's more on the social aspect, so he doesn't like working with people. He is very solitary. But because I know who he is and what he enjoys, it is a lot easier for me to partner him with another student who also has similar interests. Whereas I had not known that about him, I might have gotten upset if he didn't work with somebody that I told him to work with. I do take my students' interests and their comfort levels into consideration when I am putting them in groups and when I am talking to them or I am even doing a lesson. So I want to read a quote from the book about what basically creates that culture of learning within a classroom. So successful instruction is consistent, rigorous, integrated across disciplines, connected to students' lived cultures, connected to their intellectual legacies, engaging and designed for problem solving that is useful beyond the classroom. What this means is that when we are giving instruction, we are giving instruction to individuals. We are not giving instructions to blank slates. We are not just giving instructions to empty cups. Each kid comes with their own lived experiences, their own cultures, their own languages. Just because my class is 99% Black students, not all of these Black students have the same experience or have the same cultures or backgrounds. I have Caribbean students, I have Nigerian students, Ghanaian students, I have students from Britain with a Nigerian background. All of these students, although they fall under the category as Black, they are not the same. And I had to learn that when I came to the South. Me being a SoCal, California Black person is not the same as being a Southern Black person. Our culture was not always the same. However, what we did share, I capitalized on that. And I did. I learned a lot. I listened to my students in my 3rd, 4th, and 5th year of teaching, just so I got a better sense of who they are. In this picture, you have my advisee. She invited me to her aerial dance. And I went, and just seeing me there made our relationship 2-3 times stronger because I am now a part of her community. I am not just her advisor or not just her teacher. I have involved myself in the community. This is one of the last photos I have with my advisory. They're juniors here. And this is a far cry from what they were in 9th grade. Before they knew me, before they knew what I do for them, they would have never had these smiles on their faces. 9th grade years, I had a bunch of skippers. I had a lot of students who just did not go to class, and these girls would fight me tooth and nail before they would go to class. But what did I do? Miss Lee was there during her planning period, rounding them up and taking them to whatever class they needed to be there. Miss Lee was there checking their grades. Miss Lee was there motivating them, telling them how beautiful they are, telling them what great people they are, going to their events, making sure that they had everything that they needed. Was this successful with all of my students in my advisory? No. But what it did is it showed them that I actually cared about them and that they were capable of being at this school and that they were capable of doing their work. And here they are, their senior year, about to go off to college and be great, successful individuals. And I am very proud of each and every one of them. However, that wouldn't have been possible if I didn't have other teachers there with me. Lisa Delpit makes a point in her book that basically says that these teachers who are in the community, these teachers who are already there, these teachers of color are a resource. These teachers will help you. And that is what I had when I moved to the South, is a bunch of teachers who knew the culture and who knew the students who were able to tell me, hey, this is how it's done here, or hey, this is how I do it. And they weren't afraid to let me come into their classroom. So without those other teachers, I don't think I would be in the position I am today to have those same connections I do have with the students and the teachers and the community. So probably my first year of teaching, we in Teach for America was shown the video of Rita Pearson. And to this day, this video always captures my heart. And basically it's a TED Talk where she talks about taking the most vulnerable of students and giving them love and watching them transform into different individuals. Now that I've read this book and now that I've had experience teaching students who are the most vulnerable, I find that that TED Talk is more important to me today than it ever was in my first year of teaching. So this quote, "Every child deserves a champion, an adult who will never give up on them, who understands the power of connection and insists they become the best they can possibly be." That is what every student needs. And when you give that love, that compassion to a student, they will move mountains for you. They will do anything for you. And they will become the best that they can be. And I really appreciate Lisa Delpit's book. I highly recommend it. Please, if you have not read this as an educator, please pick it up. As you can see, I have my copy, and I am not going to let anyone borrow it because I like my notes the way they are. So thank you very much for listening to this podcast. Have a great evening. Be safe out here during COVID-19. Peace.